to
Okay.
go.
Okay, take a great posture, best posture of the day, Wonder Woman or Black Panther or Superman posture, and then relax, and with respect and friendliness, let's all bow to one another. I have a vision of people everywhere listening to a podcast while driving and bowing and swerving slightly. So bow safely. So today I wanted to talk about brokenheartedness. Why on earth would we want to talk about brokenheartedness and not get away from it and smother it in pints of Ben and Jerry's while sitting on the couch while binging Netflix to get away from our brokenheartedness? So yesterday I was hanging out with a friend who is brokenhearted. You know, tears were pretty much shooting out of his heart, straight out of his eyes. He had just gone through a breakup with another friend of mine. And I think that's how a lot of us view brokenheartedness, as this kind of really beautiful, sad thing that happens once in a while when you lose a father, you lose a, maybe get fired from a job, or something awful goes wrong. You break up with a loved one. You get in a fight, maybe, with someone. From a Buddhist point of view, we have a different notion of brokenheartedness, which is that, and this is how I parted from my friend when we were biking on the bike path. I said, remember the warrior, meaning in the Buddhist context, a peaceful person who is dedicating her or his life to the benefit of all, should always be brokenhearted. It's not something you're trying to get away from. All right, I think this podcast is totally done. It's not something you're trying to get away from. I had a Buddhist teacher who, whenever he got to the point, he would repeat it like 3 times. And I always appreciated it because I think I only half heard the first time every time. It's not something you're trying to get away from. You want to be brokenhearted all the time. Trungpa Rinpoche had this poem that is beautiful, that the warrior's heart is sort of naked. It can feel the slightest breeze. Even a blade of grass could hurt it. You want that. He would say, Trungpa Rinpoche, the Buddhist teacher, he would say, you want to be brokenhearted, but you want to be cheerful at the same time. So you don't want the brokenheartedness to lead to everyday depression. When I refer to depression, generally I'm talking about everyday depression, human depression that we all go through, not clinical depression, which is entirely another thing, and respect to those who are going through that. But everyday depression is something where you kind of take your brokenheartedness too seriously, and it kind of compounds and you start doing things that aren't great for you. You stay indoors, you stay on electronics, you eat too much, you eat too little, you indulge in negative habitual patterns. Instead of, as Pema Chodron says, doing something different instead of your same old habitual pattern. So you want to be brokenhearted because that leads to empathy, and empathy leads to catharsis, and catharsis leads to joy, genuine joy, which is another way of saying love. You can't experience love or genuine joy if your heart is not open. So at Elephant, we sometimes talk about #GiveACare. Just giving a care, not giving a giving a care. It's a beautiful thing to give. Because when you give it, you actually stop obsessing about your own unhappiness for a second, and you start thinking about others, and you can actually enjoy your life. Eleanor Roosevelt grew up self-described very ugly, very miserable, very lonely, and at some point she realized that serving others, this was to paraphrase her quote, serving others was the only thing and the first thing that gave her genuine joy or happiness. And from that moment on, she resolved to serve others with her entire life, because that, selfishly, is how to be happy for her. And it's not a bad selfishness. I think Pema Chodron talks about that. If I can find it quickly, she refers to His Holiness the Dalai Lama describes 2 kinds of selfish people, the wise and the unwise. Unwise, selfish people only think of themselves, and the result is confusion and pain. Wise, selfish people know that the best thing they can do for themselves is to be there for others. As a result, they experience joy. Yvon Chouinard has that quote too about environmentalism. He says environmentalism is the ultimate selfish thing. If you care about yourself, you better protect this planet, because otherwise you're not going to have a quality experience of life, and certainly your children won't. So when I was young, I fell in love with this beautiful, inside and out beautiful woman, or girl. We were in high school, Susanna, and that was my first love. And it was super magical, and we had no idea what we were doing. And when we broke up, I missed her for years. And then I went to this Buddhist seminary, like a college, for 3 months up in the Shambhala Mountain Center. It was then called Rocky Mountain Dharma Center. And I did this 3-month seminary. And one night, and I just missed Susanna every single day, like all the time. And it wasn't romantic. If that sounds romantic, it wasn't. It was really sad. And I left this banquet. We were all at this banquet. So the seminary would have 2 weeks of meditation and eating in Oryoki meditation style and not talking. And then it would have 2 weeks of study and celebration and just a lot of studying and reading and then celebration. So in that period, we had a banquet one night, and something was going on, and I just was feeling super brokenhearted, to the point where I left the banquet and I went out into a field where we practiced Kyudo, sort of Zen archery, and looked up at the big bright Milky Way, because up there the stars are so bright, the mountains are all surrounding you and the stars are super bright, and I just felt brokenhearted and kind of cried. And my friend Jenny came out and comforted me. And I remember that moment so clearly, because what really stuck with me was I was reading, actually that summer I was studying in person with Pema Chodron, and she said, brokenheartedness is bodhicitta. And bodhicitta is bodhi-citta, bodhi seed. Bodhi means awaken or awake, like Buddha. So the seed of awakening is in all of us, all the time. You literally can't get rid of it. Poor Hitler tried to be the most evil guy on the planet and just be mean to everybody. He's the ultimate example of selfishness in a bad way. Somewhere deep, way down there and buried, he had bodhicitta. Doesn't make him a object of sympathy particularly, but we all have it unconditionally. We can, however, successfully bury it in selfishness. And so she said, the feeling of brokenheartedness is bodhicitta. The only difference is you need to let go of, get rid of the subject. So if you're attached to your brokenheartedness with a subject, he, her, she left me, he left me, they left me, that's kind of creepy, ultimately. It's a human experience, and it's okay to be attached, but you have to let go of that. But don't try to get rid of the brokenheartedness. So when I was hanging out with my friend yesterday, I really encouraged him to, on the one hand, distract himself from it, like bike around town, get out, laugh. I didn't want him to just dwell in it and get every day depressed, but I did also want him to feel it and to talk about it directly. And often when someone is grieving or going through something, it's actually really kind and brave as a friend to talk about it directly with them, instead of kind of ignoring the elephant in the room. Which, it's a great expression here, because you really can't ignore the elephant in the room. That's the whole point of the quote. I'm in a pretty small room right now. It's like a trailer size. If there was an elephant in here and I tried to ignore it, that literally is insane and silly and dumb and doesn't make sense. Why is there an elephant in the room? It's huge. It can barely stand up. So, talk about your grief, talk about your brokenheartedness. And then the third thing is, obviously, he needs to spend time with himself, by himself. And, I talked about the Buddhist notion of regret as being super important. Trungpa Rinpoche said, you should feel guilty. You should feel bad about yourself. You should feel regretful for 3 seconds and then move on. So it's not literally 3 seconds, but the notion is, when we break up with someone we love, we kind of had an idea that maybe it would work and it would last forever. And I just did a video on how forever is not sustainable. And then we break up. One of the questions we all say, and I've written about this on Elephant with the 3-second regret discussion, is we say, what's wrong with me? Everyone else seems to have their stuff together, or at least most people. I go to the park and I see all these couples holding hands, and why can't I have that? What's wrong with me? And that's a really hard question that comes up when we're brokenhearted, as well as other times, but particularly when you're brokenhearted. And it's actually important to look at that question bravely and fully and say, what is wrong with me? Why am I hard to live with for all these people? I'm 44. If I didn't face that question fully, I may never be able to have a partner, which I want to be able to have because I want to have children, and I love being foolish and running around with children and I would love the idea of having a big old family and having a best friend partner who I happen to be attracted to. That's incredibly important to me. So I need to figure out what's wrong with me. At the same time, you don't want to make a big project of it. Trungpa Rinpoche's typical advice, no matter what anyone was going through, was sit more, sit, practiced meditation more. He had a very high voice and a British accent. Jolly good luck, sweetheart. So basically, it is good to talk about your problems. It is good to have a mentor. It is good to have a meditation teacher. It is good to have community and friends. But on some level, just sit, find your breath, take a good posture, dedicate yourself to the benefit of all sentient beings. Find your breath and any distraction that comes up, including what's wrong with me. Notice that thought and return to the breath. And the breath is a stand-in for the present moment. So I have another podcast or video on how to meditate, and I recommend doing that in community, on your own, having a meditation instructor. Usually those are free at Shambhala centers or Buddhist centers around the world. So look them up. So I think we're about there. I'm going to read a couple quotes because there's some good stuff from people who are way wiser than me. So Pema Chodron, this is a blog on Elephant, a Buddhist teaching on loneliness, rejection, and a broken heart. She talks about the genuine heart of sadness, which is an expression I think coined by Trungpa Rinpoche. There comes a time when the bubble of ego is popped and you can't get the ground back for an extended period of time. Those times when you absolutely cannot get it back together are the most rich and powerful times in our lives. Pema Chodron. Why it's the most rich and powerful time in our life is because most of the time we can distract ourselves with Netflix, with ice cream, with friends, with drinking, with running around, with being busy, with exercising, with traveling. I remember two of my best friends broke up. This was like 15 years ago now. And they were both like kind of Trustafarian types. And I can't remember if it was the guy or the girl. I think it was the guy. He literally was brokenhearted, so he bought an airplane ticket and flew away. Instead of just sitting with his own heart, he flew away. The bad news there is wherever you go, there you are, right? You can't really get away from it, but you can successfully distract yourself your entire life from how you feel if you don't want to care or feel and go through the beautiful door of empathy toward joy and love. So if you don't want joy or love, then don't give a care and just distract yourself your entire life. And Facebook, Instagram, all these things are your friend. So anytime you feel a gap in your life, like you come to a stoplight, definitely get on your phone right away and fill that space, because you could feel something in your heart at any time. I mean, basic goodness and your bodhicitta is there all the time. So to guard against it, you would have to bury it. You're going to have to be super aggressive, and I mean that word literally, about burying it your entire life. So if that whole path doesn't sound attractive, which I certainly hope it doesn't, then go toward empathy. And empathy, there's a meditation practice called Tonglen, which is also on our site, Giving and Taking, reverses the flow of ego. So ego is always wanting to push away feeling anything uncomfortable and cling to pleasure, anything comfortable. And that's called cocoon, which is in the book Shambhala, by Trungpa Rinpoche. So we want to stay in a cozy little stale cocoon. But ultimately, with our bodhicitta, our basically good human heart, we want fresh air. The cocoon can be comfortable, like when you're sick, you're under the covers, you're watching Netflix, you're eating your popcorn. That can be fun for 2 days, but then at some point you're bored. You want to move, you want to feel, you want to connect. So you open the air, you get fresh air, and you become brave. You go out into the world, and that is the path. That is the warrior's path. The warrior is called a warrior in the Buddhist or Shambhala tradition because she is brave. You have to be a little bit brave, and bravery is not John Wayne like, so blah, blah, blah. I can't really do the John Wayne voice. Well, cowboy. I can't really remember. But it's not a machismo, it's a willingness to be vulnerable, which is almost the opposite. There's a movie I just watched about Dalton Trumbo. John Wayne was, of course, like leading the Joseph McCarthy efforts to come down on so-called communists in the Hollywood community, and he was talking about patriotism and all this stuff, and there's this great scene where Dalton Trumbo said, "You're talking about patriotism a lot. When was it again that you served in the military?" It was never. John Wayne never served. Dalton Trumbo served with distinction. So often true warriors are branded by fake patriots. I think they're called something hawks, chicken hawks. So Cheney, Vice President Cheney, President Bush, chicken hawks. The most aggressive people usually never experienced war. War is hell, as Sherman said. So maybe this is going all over the place, but those who romanticize aggression have never actually experienced the brokenheartedness of war. I have seen war. War is hell. I know war. War is hell. That's a famous quote, I think, from FDR. War is hell. So forget all that aggression stuff. Go toward empathy, and that's true bravery. And then you care about other people, and then you become a true hero. A hero is a hero because he or she cares. So that brokenheartedness is a gift. As Pema Chödrön says, it's the one time when you can't run away. You're faced with that, what's wrong with me? You feel that fully. You practice Tonglen for a kabillion hours. You can look it up on elephantjournal.com. And then you kind of reverse the flow of ego, reverse the flow, the logic of gated community spirituality, where you keep out anything that's uncomfortable and you just try to keep everything you like to yourself. But then you wind up being lonely. You play on your personal basketball court that you built in your McMansion, but no one is there to play on your basketball court. Everyone's out on the community, the crappy basketball courts, having a great time. And you have your perfect basketball court all to yourself, and you're lonely. That's the typical MTV Cribs episode, is lonely as F. AF. I just coined that. So I have one more quote for you, if I can find it. Oh yeah. So yesterday I was on Reddit, and I was reading the news kind of area of Reddit, and I just wanted to share a couple headlines from what I shared. 1,100 mutilated dolphin bodies have washed up on France's beaches. That's just recently. That's in Time magazine. NRA safety officer enlisted a Sandy Hook truther to sow doubt about Parkland shooting, emails show. Heartbreaking images show miserable tigers, bears, and monkeys languishing in an abandoned zoo 2 months after it closed. Outrage as miserable tigers and monkeys are abandoned, so they're starving to death in a Spanish zoo. Video of Alaska father and son illegally killing bear and cubs shrieking made public. I think that's probably enough for now. EU states unanimously announce we do not recognize Israel's sovereignty over Golan Heights. So that's just what I shared yesterday. So you know the expression, if you're not angry, you're not paying attention. The Buddhist version of that would be, if you're not brokenhearted, you're not paying attention. Let's take a good posture, an open heart, brave heart, and give it away. Thank you.